And so after breaching the pass at Thermopylae on our map located here, the Persian juggernaut can continue its advance southward through Boeotia, the region of Greece here known as Boeotia, and into the Attic Peninsula, where they are within striking distance of the city of Athens itself. And nominally, this was the reason why Xerxes invaded Greece. He wanted to burn this particular city to the ground. Now, the Greeks themselves are thrown into a sense of panic, even though Leonidas and his force at Thermopylae had bought the Greeks about a week's worth of time. There was still a big debate as to what to do should the Persians breach the pass at Thermopylae. And most of the Greeks, the Hellenic League, and certainly members of city states that were based in the Peloponnese here, they wanted to basically wall off the Isthmus of Corinth here and just defend their home turf of the Peloponnese. Uh, there was a bit of wishful thinking that perhaps if the Persians got to Attica, burned Athens to the ground, they would just simply head on back home. Mission accomplished. The Athenians are punished, and they wouldn't continue their advance across the Isthmus of Corinth and into the Peloponnese itself, particularly if there was a set of fortifications here, a big wall with a lot more Spartans to defend it than the Persians had tangled with at Thermopylae. So the Athenians themselves are going to really feel the pinch here, and Themistocles has his work cut out for him. He has two tasks. He has first to convince the Athenian people themselves that they're still in the fight and that they need to use what military assets they have left, and this is primarily the fleet, which is still intact. Still, we can imagine a top strength of about 200 triremes, which is no joke. So the Athenians are still in the game, and then Themistocles has got to convince the members of the Hellenic League that it is in their best interest to fight alongside the Athenian fleet. Themistocles has ruled out the possibility of another major land battle. Instead, he feels that the Greeks will have a better chance of defeating the Persian navy. With the Persian navy, defeated, maybe destroyed, the Persian army, as vast as it is, becomes vulnerable without naval support. So Themistocles has got his work cut out for him, convincing people to see his way of thinking. Now, Themistocles' first goal of convincing the Athenian people to stay in the fight, to fight the Persians at sea, is made easier in a way when a delegation returns from Delphi, a delegation of Athenian citizens that had been dispatched to Delphi to ask the oracle, Apollo's priestess, what the Athenians should do now that the pass at Thermopylae had been forced, and now that the Persians had a clear road into the Attic Peninsula, into Athens itself. So the delegation returns to Athens with this message from the oracle. Await not in quiet the armed host upon the land. Slip away, turn your back. You will meet in battle anyway. A wall of wood alone shall be a boon to you and your children. Divine Salamis will destroy the sons of women. So, a rather cryptic pronouncement, and of course, these pronouncements were usually very cryptic. But for Themistocles, who is looking for any angle he can get, he immediately seizes on two phrases in the oracle. The idea of the wooden walls. Some of the old timers of Athens thought that the wooden walls meant this old palisade fence that used to stand on the Acropolis, and they thought that the people of Athens should hunker down there, or at least some of the people of Athens should hunker down there, and that wooden wall would stand against the Persian assaults. But Themistocles says, you are foolish if you think this. The wall of wood is our navy, it is our ships, our triremes. And this is our bastion. This is what will allow us to prevail against the Persians. By taking to the sea in these ships and fighting the Persians at sea, we will emerge victorious. And look, the oracle has even given us the location of the next battle. And of course, that is Salamis. Which is an island just off the coast of Attica. So, as far as Themistocles is concerned, the idea of the means of fighting the battle, the ships, is evident in this oracle, as is the location of the next battle, that of the island of Salamis. And so, again, with some pretty crafty politicking, Themistocles is able to convince the Athenian people that this should be their next course of action, to prepare for a naval battle somewhere around the island of Salamis. But of course, Athens could not be defended, and this is, it's a tough call, but it turns out to be the right one. And Themistocles will order the evacuation of Athens. All of the able-bodied men will go to Salamis and will prepare to take up their positions on the rowing benches of the triremes. The civilians will go to Salamis too. They, of course, will not take part in the battle, but they will be there for their own safety. Another city-state, Troezen, also agrees to take in a large number of Athenians as refugees. And this evacuation gets underway and is completed just as the Persians enter Athenian territory. And by the time the Persians do get to Athens itself, there are only a few diehards who could not agree with Themistocles' interpretation, who believed that the wooden fence, the palisade on the Acropolis, was what the god Apollo was referring to, and so they stay there, and they hold out for a while, but ultimately they will all be killed as the Persians take control of Athens and begin systematically burning it to the ground. Themistocles, his next effort has to be to convince the members of the Hellenic League to fight north of the Peloponnese, to fight at Salamis alongside the Athenians. The Athenians have already made up their mind that they will fight. And here's the island of Salamis. This is Attica right here. Here's Athens over here, just to give you some idea of the lay of the land. And Themistocles has to convince the members of the Hellenic League that this is the wise course of action. And of course, he does this by, reminding them of the tactical situation. At Salamis, if you can somehow lure the Persians into the narrow strait here, between the island itself and the Attic Peninsula, in a way this will be reminiscent of Thermopylae, the narrow pass there, where superior numbers won't be a decisive advantage. Certainly the Persians still had probably several hundred more ships than the combined Greek navy, so they have a numeric advantage, but the point is to fight in a place where that numeric advantage won't come into play. And Salamis, the Strait of Salamis, was such a place. So Themistocles attempts to appeal to their logic, and it's a tough sell because many of these guys want to protect their own homeland, which is on the Peloponnese. But finally, Themistocles threatens the Hellenic League by saying, you know what? If you guys don't step up and help us out, we are going to take our 200 triremes, we're going to load them up with our people, and we're going to sail to Italy and start a new city there. And you guys are on your own without our 200 triremes. Good luck. And this is enough to convince the commander of the overall Hellenic League fleet. He was a Spartan named Eurybiades. He says, you know what, you're right. And he basically, with the Spartans on board, everybody else falls in line, and the decision is made to fight alongside the Athenians at Salamis. Now, the trick will be to lure the Persians into the narrow strait. At Thermopylae, they had no choice. That was the only route into southern Greece, was to go through the pass at Thermopylae. So they had to go through that confined space. However, nothing necessitates the Persian navy from going into the Strait of Salamis. It will have to take a clever ruse. And here, Themistocles plays on the stereotype that by now the Persians have, of all Greeks, that they're all treacherous, that they're willing to turn on one another in Medi's. And what Themistocles does is have one of his trusted servants, a guy named Sikanos, one night get on a rowboat and row himself across to the Attic Peninsula, where the Persians now control, and report to the area commander there that his master, Themistocles, claims that the Greeks are getting ready to flee. And this will be a prime opportunity for the Persians to bag them all at once while they are trapped within the Strait of Salamis. And if the Persians can block up both ends, the southern end here and the northern end here, then they will have the Greek navy, all of it, in a trap, and basically the campaign will be over, and Xerxes will be master of all of Greece. Again, this is the bait, and the Persians take it. So Xerxes decides that his fleet will indeed engage the Greeks, and he decides to split his forces. And traditionally, this is one of the cardinal errors of military history. When you are in an enemy territory and you decide to split your forces. But Xerxes wants to make sure both ends of the Salamis Strait, again the southern end here and what we can call the northern end here, both ends are blocked up. And so Xerxes orders a large number of his ships to basically row south of the island and come up to block this area here. These were the Egyptian contingent. And this is good for the Greeks because, again, they will actually be fighting lesser Persians now when the battle begins as the sun rises. Because these Egyptians have been told, just take up a blocking position here. Don't go into the straits themselves. Wait until you catch any straggling Greeks that may be trying to escape from this end. So the contours of the battle take shape, a very confined space with the Greeks, who the Persians think are all fearful and are one step away from surrendering anyway. But that is hardly what they will meet as the sun rises. Now, on the morning of the battle, Xerxes actually had a throne set up overlooking the Strait of Salamis so that he could be up in the luxury box as the spectacle unfolds. And he had made it known that he will be there, he will be watching. And this turns out to be an added complication for the Persian fleet. Because if the great king is watching, you better believe that if you are seen as a shirker or somebody is holding back, you will feel the wrath of the great king. I mean, if you guys remember the story of Pythios, that Lydian nobleman who tried to get his eldest son out of the campaign, and enraged Xerxes had the boy cut in half. So the Persian fleet and every sailor in it knew that they had to do their duty, otherwise there was going to be some big problems. So as the sun rises, Persians have entered the Strait of Salamis, and here is a illustrated map. This is an overhead shot to give you guys some sense of just how confined this space is. I have this black arrow here on the illustrated map that refers to this type of peninsula that juts out. And you can see in the overhead shot, this really is some tight quarters. But this is, of course, just as Themistocles has designed. And there are a few added factors that we should mention. So on the morning of the battle, there are a couple of factors that are going to count against Xerxes' navy and its chance of success. The first is, of course, the confined space of the Strait of Salamis. You can see Xerxes' navy entering the strait, and much of that navy was comprised of Phoenician ships, and these were lightly built triremes. They were built for speed. Now, on the morning of the battle, a breeze blew in that the Greeks were familiar with, but of course the Phoenicians were not. And this caused the Phoenician ships, the lightly built Phoenician ships, to turn sideways. And of course, when this happened, it made them very vulnerable, it made their flanks very vulnerable to the more powerful and heavily built Athenian triremes that had a field day that morning. What complicated things again for the Persians was the very presence of Xerxes. He's set up on a throne somewhere here where he's watching the action, and the Persian sailors, the members of the Phoenician contingent, the Egyptian contingent, there was a contingent of Ionian Greeks that were pressed into service as part of the Persian fleet. All these guys knew that the great king was watching. So as the initial contingents of the Persian fleet go into the straits and get pummeled, they want to withdraw, but they cannot because all the other contingents don't want to be accused of cowardice, so they keep rowing into the melee. And this creates this enormous traffic jam where the Persian fleet is basically stuck in place while the Greek ships begin shearing off oars or puncturing hulls and sinking ships. So the presence of Xerxes really did backfire in this case because people were trying too hard to impress him, when the more prudent course of action would be to allow some flexibility in these broader waters out here. Everybody wanted to get in on the action inside the strait itself, so it worked to the Greek advantage. Now, as far as numbers go, they're sketchy, but the sources that I've seen that make the most sense to me are the Greeks lose about 40 ships. The Persian contingents, the Persian fleet, will lose just in excess of 200 ships. So it's quite a significant victory for the Greeks, and the Persian fleet is shattered. Indeed, many of these contingents, after the battle is over, when night falls, many of the Phoenicians in particular are going to slink away back to their home waters. And this is a real problem now for Xerxes, as his fleet has been crippled. He is concerned that the Greeks will go on the offensive and sail up to the Hellespont, that area that he had bridged, set up a pontoon bridge of boats. And if the Greeks seize that, then he, Xerxes, and his army will be trapped in Greece as winter approaches. So it's a very big dilemma for Xerxes, and he decides to split the difference. He and most of the army will head home, accompanied by what's left of the fleet, but he will leave behind a pretty significant size force to take up winter quarters in Boeotia, a region of Greece that had Medized. And I will talk about that final engagement in the next video lecture.